During the Middle Ages, the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Empire, and to a limited extent the Roman Catholic Church, had preserved much of the ancient learning from Greece and Rome. But this learning lay buried in writings that few people read. Right now, Charlemagne is branding himself with English, German, Italian, and Spanish scholars. The development of Europe is greatly affected by the revival of learning, which led to an increase in the architecture, the discoveries of science, and development of art.
The decline of learning is the fall of education among a vast amount of people that occurred during the Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages, Germanic invaders overran the western half of the Roman Empire. Repeated invasions and constant warfare caused a series of changes that altered the economy, government, and culture. Due to the invasions from both land and sea, merchants' businesses collapsed and trade was disrupted. Oftentimes, nobles moved to rural lands, and soon other city dwellers moved to the countryside, which resulted in much of the population to become rural. The effect of many invasions was that cities were abandoned because citizens did not want to be in an invaded, not safe area. The Germanic invaders that occupied Rome were illiterate and as a result could not read or write. All knowledge of Greek culture was lost. The revival of learning was a reintroduction of education in Europe. The start of the revival was led by Charlemagne. For his many sons and daughters and other children at the court, Charlemagne opened a palace school. He also ordered monasteries to open schools to train future monks and priests. Charlemagne took interest in his children, the children of his court, and their education. Charlemagne, being a religious man, wanted the Christian church to continue to have well-educated church officials. There were many people who influenced and carried on the revival of learning. It was around this time when monasteries were created to adapt to the new rural lifestyle of the people. A monk named Benedict helped turn monasteries into schools. Previously, there had not been many centers for education, and with the help of Benedict, education became accessible to children. Monasteries also became Europe's best educated communities. Charlemagne, a great emperor during the time, also encouraged learning. He revived the palace school of Aachen, its capital. He set up other schools, opening them to peasant boys as well as nobles. The revival of learning started with the Crusades coming in contact with the Muslim and Byzantine empires. In 1100 AD, the Crusades recovered important Greek works and technology. In the 1300s AD, Latin was the main language among many scholars. A dialect called vernacular allowed citizens to increase the literacy rates. Vernacular was an everyday language of the homeland. More citizens began to use writing and art in day-to-day life once again. Universities were created to house and discuss all of the new information collected by translating foreign writings. New ideas and forms of expression began to flow out of the universities. These universities helped to create the revival of learning. Europe was becoming a well-rounded, educated society. During the Middle Ages, Western nations began the growth and development of literatures. As soon as the forms of literature were done, the creation of song and romance was made. In the north, people recited poems of Charlemagne and his paladins and of King Arthur. In Italy, Dante and his Divine Comedy created a language for the Italians. Even though the new languages and forms of literature were being created, schools and eventually scientific discoveries were made, like the phenomenon of how life was created. What learning molded many minds of scientists, artists, and poets. Many famous buildings were built. Between the 10th and 13th centuries, most European cathedrals were built in the Romantic style. These styles of buildings were taught in the Aegean Palace School. The groundwork for the rebirth of learning was laid by the process of political power of the monasteries of Europe. Later on, Otto the Great asserted his right to appoint bishops and archbishops throughout his kingdom, and with his power, this inspired him to teach higher-class men to educate them with languages like Greek and Latin. After the 1100 ADs, many more schools were built and the development of Europe was changed to spread this education. This also brought a different political view to change the government of Europe. Furthermore, all political, state, and educational views were developed in Europe through the revival of learning.